This is Digital Anarchist.
All right, Chris Riley here. I am in the media booth for Digital Anarchist and DevOps.com, and I am sitting here with Harshal of Cumetry. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Cumetry?
Sure. Thanks again, Chris, for this opportunity. My name is Harshal. I work as a product specialist with Cumetry. And Cumetry is an end-to-end quality management platform where we enable continuous testing using our test management and test automation products.
Yeah, all right. So we're here at SOSCON 2019 and continuous testing buzzword, right?
Yes.
What does it actually mean?
So there are different meanings to different people, and it's a very loosely defined term. In terms of what Cumetry defines as continuous testing, I would say, in terms of your software development life cycle, testing has always been an afterthought. And with the evolution of continuous integration and continuous deployment, there was always a gap for testers where they were lost. Hey, that is DevOps, but where is Dev Test Ops? And that's where continuous testing fills in that gap.
Right.
Where you want to integrate your testing at each and every phase of your software development lifecycle, whether it's going to be at unit testing layer, or it's going to be at functional testing, or performance testing, or security testing. And it's an automated process. You don't want to include your manual processes hampering that whole testing lifecycle or that continuous delivery pipeline. And that's where this continuous testing comes into picture.
Yeah. And so I think one thing that everybody can agree on is that if you put the word continuous in front of it, it implies automation.
Yes.
So that you can't
Exactly.
do without that. But is it also part of the shift left and shift right movements?
That's a very good point, right? So shift left and shift right. So at lunch table, we were having this really good conversation with companies like Dell and Fidelity, and they were defining what is shift left. Is it in terms of time domain we are talking about shift left, or is it terms of your process you're defining shift right and shift left? I think it's more to a shift left because through automation we are trying to cut out our time domain, right? And that's where continuous testing fits well with shift left technologies and shift left
Interesting.
processes rather than the shift right processes.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I hadn't thought about
Because
it.
shift left is always like an afterthought if you think about it. Shift left is you already thought through it, you want to implement it ahead of time.
Right. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it as, something that is either related to time or to processes and tools. That's an interesting aspect of it. So, I like to talk about the software delivery chain as its own thing, as its own application in its own right. And, with that, it also implies that it's not just the tooling and the tasks that the tooling run. There's other stuff associated with managing this process. And when it comes to test automation, what are those things? Like, what are the things that you have to think about besides just running the test?
That's a great point, right? So with challenges that we saw in the market or in the industry, software testing industry, if you look at it, I have my automation team working on something, my manual team working on something, and there is no collaboration because they are working on the same thing, they're testing the same thing. There is no collaboration, and that's what is missing. So that's what we try to bridge with our tools and technology, where all those product managers, engineers, automation engineers, and manual testers, they all collaborate towards one goal, to ship best quality software to their customers. Now, in order to do that, shift left, which is BDD, behavior driven or acceptance test driven, those kind of technologies play a big role in it because they all can communicate on the same platform rather than they communicate at a code level, somebody communicating at a high level. BDD gives that features for everyone to communicate. And also, as you mentioned, it's not just the tools, but it's also processes and the culture change that you have to go through in adopting these tools and technology. So I think it's combination of everything that you need as part of this whole continuous testing life cycle, where you adopt the right tools and technology, you adapt the right processes, and then follow through their processes, implement those processes, implement those tools in the right best practice manner,
Right.
rather than just implementing for the sake of it.
Right.
So I think those are some of the things that with Qmetry we are trying to solve as part of that whole continuous testing and agile and DevOps lifecycle.
Yeah. So what have you seen with your customers as the biggest barrier? You know, is it a technology barrier? Is it a culture barrier? What is the biggest challenge to adopting automation?
The biggest challenge in adopting automation in most of our customers is a culture. It's technology. Everyone is tech savvy. We are in the world where there are robotaxis running
Right.
around the corner. And I was in Vegas last week, and there was a Lyft car just pulled up, and there was no driver in the car. And I was like, really? And that's a culture shock for me, right? So technology, we all love technology, but when it comes to changing the culture, am I comfortable sitting in that Lyft car? I don't know. Am I comfortable adopting a particular technology? I don't know. So that's the culture barrier, which I feel is hampering the progress of that whole continuous testing lifecycle.
Yeah. And what advice then would you give companies to, and this may not be fair because I've been asked this question, you know, and I don't think there is a clear answer, but
Right.
what advice would you give a company who identifies that culture is a problem to help, you know, to work on that?
So I'll give you an example of our current customer that they want to adopt to this whole continuous testing lifecycle. They made a ground shaking change. So you have to be ready for ground shaking changes. You have to be ready for people leaving the company. You have to be ready for people getting upset. But that's nature of change, right?
bloody. Yep.
And you have to adapt to it. So
Yeah.
don't be afraid. Just dive into it, and you won't know how to swim until you dive into the pool.
Yeah.
So you get into it, you will succeed.
Yeah. I don't think you can be timid.
Exactly.
I really don't.
Exactly.
You know,
You have to be
even
bold.
talking to, you have to be bold, and you have to understand the benefits. And what are the benefits? Like, what is the biggest benefit companies should expect to gain via test automation?
Sure. So I think we are test automation, and I won't just call it test automation in general, but this whole, if you look at the continuous testing paradigm, right? We want to incorporate our customer and customer feedback into our loop, because what has been happening is the product teams have been working and getting the features out, but are those features required by my customers?
Right.
And with day and age where we are, IoT and mobile, everything is based on feedback, right? So I can write a review on an app store that this app sucks, but if as a company I'm not ready to adopt that change, adopt that feedback into that continuous testing life cycle, I'm losing out.
Right. Absolutely.
So that's
it's the
biggest
customer.
benefit. That's our logo as well. Customer centricity, customer
Right.
first,
Right.
and that's, I believe everyone should have that in mind, because customer is king right now.
Yeah. And that's where all the pressure is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Harshal, I really appreciate you joining me to chat about the future in test automation, and you know, I look forward to what you guys do in the near future.
Sure. Thanks
All
a
right.
lot. It was my pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.